We are very, very privileged today to have some amazing CEOs. And the thesis behind today is to really develop the future perspectives from these CEOs as we look into 2022 and beyond. And it's really critical to be able to have introspection and reflection at this difficult time. So this is why we've got this cross-fertilization. On the one hand, we have the large enterprise people, Microsoft, and the lead for the enterprise area, Naeem Yazbek, is going to be with us. And he's going to talk about how large industries are looking at. Exactly the same with Javi Anglada, who's also at Accenture, looking at large corporations. We have Peter Middlebrook, who's joining us from Greece, I believe. And he's a global macroeconomist, and he's also going to be looking at what he does in terms of advising countries and so on. Then we have what I would call the insurgent and the challenger CEOs, Fahmi Shawa, Thea, and Mona. And they are disrupting in the environments. They're creating new business models. They're driving businesses through. And that tension between the two elements here in terms of thought leadership is critically important. Without further ado, what I'm going to do is share a few slides with you just to sort of get the show on the road and let people join in, and we take it from there. So the idea here is to share my perspective as a futurist in terms of where the world is going. So I think the future readiness that we'd like to see is effectively like skydiving, because it is dangerous, but we can do it. It needs collaboration and moving forward. The world is way faster than we think. And in this fast world, we either reinvent ourselves, innovate ourselves, or we really die. My professor, Marshall Goldsmith, he's also my mentor and coach. He wrote this amazing book ages ago, which is still evergreen, which is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So our accounting degree, our engineering degree, etc., got us here. But what we need to do is into the future is really critical. This beautiful coral reef gives us harmony and peace. And what I want to do is use this as a backdrop for the world that we are living in, because in this environment, we need to build trust. Trust is one of the key threads that will be there throughout this conversation. Ethics and empathy are very close partners with trust. In this world that we're living in, truth and values become critical, because we need to be able to understand the absolute objective truth, and that's the single source of truth as it comes through. Some of the key drivers we look at and we're looking at this point in time is transformation is moving from decades down to months and sometimes even weeks. The organizational dynamics are shifting. We need to balance innovation and risk. And while we're doing this, globalization has happened, digitization is happening. Now we're going to dispersion. And this is something we'll talk about today. Organizationally, from vertical to horizontal to hybrid, all of this is happening. And we're looking at new organizations. So my quote that I put in there is the change before you have to is a way better option than to change because you have to. So a couple of thoughts. This is one of my favorite slides. Over the last 15, 18 months, what used to take decades is now happening in months, whether it's e-commerce, telemedicine, remote working, learning, all of these areas are really changing. So future readiness is the key behind that. Now, when we look at scenario planning for COVID, the first 12 months has happened. We needed to have resilience and recovery there. We're in our second phase now, where we're looking at resourcefulness, collaboration, innovation, and so on. And moving forward, we're looking towards radical reinvention. So the same session, if we were going to do in 12 months' time, would be about radical reinnovation. Interestingly enough, this is a study which we picked up different information from two studies from Deloitte and Accenture, where 64% of companies have no program in place at this point in time to build the skills and capabilities required for the future. And only 3 to 5% have actually done a digitization program. All the industries we're talking about are being disrupted, and some more so, which had been resisting for the last few years because of COVID, have changed. Final couple of slides. These exponential technologies that we have, they are now both intersecting and accelerating simultaneously. So they are creating what we call Gutenberg moments. And when in 1451, Johannes Gutenberg came out with the printing press, everything changed. Religion changed, education changed, commerce changed, everything changed. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have about 20 Gutenberg moments happening simultaneously. And that is creating a new dynamic which the world has never seen before. And this is part of the discussion we need to be having today. The whole phrase exponential is by definition, as a formula, is acceleration is accelerating. And that acceleration is creating abundance, whether it's in computation, capital, technology, time, all aspects around us are becoming ubiquitous and accelerating. And this is the key thing, but it's creating abundance. And that's something we need to look at. This young man is my reverse mentor. He's now 11 years old. And by the time he gets to college, this is what's going to happen to computing power and drones and brain imaging and genome editing and so on, literally in 6 years from today. Are we ready for this? That would be my question. My final slide is that when new projects come in, when new things happen, our personal and corporate immune system starts clicking in. So if we want to replace our kidney, for example, we need to give it immunosuppressants first before we can replace the kidney. Are we doing that enough? This is our big villain, our internal immune system in organizations and so on. So as we move forward, when we get hit from unexpected places, and all of the changes that are happening. And I wanted to use this particular image in the spirit of Euro that's going on right now, but it's painful, but this is what's happening. And this is where a lot of the companies are. So basically, I wanted to share these slides essentially to give you an idea as a backdrop of what's going on as far as the world is concerned. Peter, welcome on board. Thank you very much. Peter is a very dear friend. He's a macroeconomist. He is a global thinker. And Peter, would you introduce yourself and tell us what geopoliticity does and how you are impacting the world that we are in today?
Indeed, thank you, Tariq and colleagues. Good to be here. So I had I'm formerly 20 years kind of public service, British government, United Nations, Vice President's Office of the World Bank. So kind of diplomatic side, but I run a number of companies, but the company of most relevance here is a company called Geopolicity. And we advise at the moment about 25, 30 countries on very complex macroeconomic fiscal restructuring. That was always a complicated thing to do anyway, but in the light of COVID, which is a kind of black swan event, most governments are not prepared at all. But I'll give you a range of the kind of thing we're doing. We're leading on the debt restructuring in Kyrgyzstan. We've just put together a 10-year investment program for the government of Djibouti. We're doing the same in Botswana, in Egypt, in Tajikistan, and in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we're advising governments on what are the opportunities that come with COVID and how do they overcome very complex, challenging structural implications of COVID. Why is that? Because COVID is asymmetric. It touches everything, the way we work, the way we transact, the way we communicate, the tax base, international trade, governance system. So it's one of those moments which opens up all of this. And we're actively involved in advising governments on how they can use this opportunity not to drown, and many are drowning, by the way, but actually use it strategically from an investment planning point of view to position financing and resources over the next 2, 3, 5 years to meet immediate challenges, but also to do what we call not bouncing back, but to bounce forward.
So do you think the time, Peter, has come for the next Bretton Woods conference to take place? Because United Nations and World Bank and people that you have served, are they actually serving the world for today's problems rather than yesterday's problems?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that, we face I wouldn't say an existential crisis, but it's an interesting opportunity. Kind of communism died at the end of the kind of late 1980s. And we're now seeing really the challenges of, a model of global capitalism that has no global oversight. So the levels of inequality are just going through the roof. You probably saw the IMF a couple of months ago. They increased what are called the special drawing rights. And they've done that because they've lent everywhere over the course of the last 18 months. The levels of debt have gone up to the tune of 20 trillion. So, if we had an economic crisis before, and this will affect businesses because it affects tax regimes and regulatory frameworks and everything else that goes with it. So there is a discussion now, which is very complicated. The levels of indebtedness become an impediment to growth. But of course, because it's not one or two countries, it's now across the board. There now needs to be a global commitment to addressing that. And some moves have come out of G20 and the Paris Club and the London Club. But I would say at the moment, there's not consensus on how to do it because of the creditors and who issues debt. Is it China within the BRI footprint? Or is it kind of IMF, World Bank kind of structured debt and so forth? So just one quick question, I won't say too much about this, is there's a growing consensus on the need to consolidate global debt, to rethink about how governments finance. There's a huge push after the Addis Ababa Agenda in 2015 and the Sustainable Development Goals about leveraging very new models of development finance. That's not crowding out private capital, that's crowding in private capital. So I think there's a good consensus on that. I still don't think, for political reasons, we are close to having any unified opinion on what the next macroeconomic global governance framework would look like. And of course, the digital cryptocurrency makes that even more challenging.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for that macroeconomic view of the world. And I wanted to start at a global level, and then we bring it back to our team. Naeem, glad to have you back. Naeem Yazbek is the Enterprise Commercial Director at Microsoft. He's the lead there, one of the biggest segments within the corporation there. Naeem, over to you to introduce yourself and then we'll go on to your slides.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. And Tara, apologies for the technical glitch. Hopefully everything is working now. So first, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you today. I think the panel is just an exceptional panel to talk about, I would say, the future of the world from an economical perspective and what we're going through. But to start with, I think today, if we look at the world, we're living two major disruptions. The major disruption is, I would say, the first one is the digital revolution we're living in, and I think this is something that is unseen. It's definitely the fourth revolution, and it's coming with tremendous opportunities, but also it's coming with its own challenges. And then the other disruption, of course, over the past 1 year has been the pandemic that I think it changed the world for the past 18 months. And I think I would argue that it changed the world for the next, I don't know how many years. There are things that will never go back to where it were. And I think it's amazing how the world reacted to the pandemic. It's amazing how suddenly digital took stage at all aspects, from the way we work to the way we buy, to the way we interact on social media, to the way organizations operate today, leveraging data. Suddenly, digital took a space, took a center stage into this world, and I think the opportunities that are coming are just exceptional. But the challenges that came have been really disturbing for so many people. And today, when we look at what we call the fourth industrial revolution, which is the digital revolution, uh, I think there is tremendous opportunities for each and every industry. From education and to the way I think education is changing forever with digital learning and online learning and the hybrid way of learning, to how do we really interact with retailers, to how financial services organizations offer services to their customers, to risk, and I can go on and on. But I think I would say the biggest opportunity that we have today is the opportunity that digital is bringing to the startup ecosystem, because historically startup has been an expensive mechanism, and I think digital is coming to make the startup life cycle a really cost-effective life cycle to start with, and hence the ability for startups to succeed is becoming way higher than before, and that will drive huge economical, I would say, growth in the next, I would argue, 20 to 50 years even. Of course, we don't know what the next revolution is going to be, but but definitely digital across all industries. It's becoming a great opportunity for every single industry, and every single CEO today, I would argue, he's the CEO of a digital company. If you're a CEO of a bank, at the end of the day, a bank is becoming a digital organization. If you're a CEO of a retailer, you're also a digital organization, because everything you operate with is digital. And I think the opportunities that digital is bringing across industries is going to be up to us to leverage. And it would be, I think in the next 10 years, we're going to sit and say, 10 years back, organizations that leverage digital are organizations that have succeeded and stayed and continued, and organizations that didn't are organizations that most probably are not going to make it. So I think that opportunity is an opportunity for really us to grab for the different industries to take. And we're seeing a huge momentum, definitely in the region, specifically in the UAE, I would argue, on how the country is really leveraging the digital at a massive scale. I think what's happening in the UAE from a, I would say, from a digital maturity, and how the government and the private sector are coming together to leverage that tremendous opportunity in the digital space. I think I would argue very few countries around the world today are really having that leverage. And as I'm someone from within the industry, and I think at Microsoft, we see the whole world, we see how different countries are operating. And honestly, we were very proud from how the UAE reacted to the pandemic. But we're also very proud on how the UAE is leveraging digital at scale, I would say. And as a corporation, we're having a deep partnership today with the government and with the private sector to enable that digital ecosystem. We've invested heavily over the past few years to bring our data center capabilities, our AI capabilities in country. And I think that has been a great opportunity, because when the pandemic came, that has been of a huge need for both the government, the education sector, but the private sector as well. So suddenly there was very solid infrastructure that the economy can leverage. And without that, I would argue there would have been lots of challenges, given the fact that there is a lot of concern about data sovereignty and where data sits, and etc. So I think that has been a major enabler of the success of the UAE to really leverage digital over the past 2 years. But also, I think what we're also doing is partnering with the private and the public sector around skilling, because in a digital world, and in a world where digital is going to be key, I would say, of enablement. Skills are going to be key on who's going to be successful and who's not going to be successful. And I think we are doing lots of effort in skilling, I would say, the overall private sector and public sector. There has been tens of thousands of people in the government that have been trained, hundreds of thousands of people in the private sector that have been trained on how to really leverage technology in order to be able to leverage that unique opportunity that is coming with this. And the last piece also in the partnership, will also working very closely on innovation with and how do we really enable innovation. So from one side, I think the investment we've done bringing the data center and AI capabilities in country has enabled both the government and the private sector to be able to leverage innovation using those cutting edge technology at scale at a very cost effective way. But also we're bringing very unique skills and resources, partnering with the government to reimagine, I would say, an overall uh, innovation ecosystem that can drive the country for the next 20 years. So just to summarize, I think the fourth revolution and what digital is bringing to the world is a unique opportunity that I think probably we are very lucky as a generation to go through it. And I think the world will definitely be a better world because of technology. Of course, we need to be careful about the challenges that comes with it. When it comes to UAE, I think there is even a more unique opportunity, given the commitment of the leadership of the country, given how agile is the country, given the aspiration of the country, and of course, given the partnership that the UAE have been able to strike with companies like Microsoft, to be able to bring cutting-edge technology, resources, and skills in the country. I think I'm very positive of how and where the UAE is going with all of this.
Great. Thank you, Naeem, for giving us that context and background. Javid, may I quickly come across to you, and if you can give a quick snapshot of Accenture, your role in Accenture, and leading from the future, which is a phrase that I use all the time. I want to hear your perspective quickly, and I'd like to then quickly go on to the rest of our panels to start the conversation, the roundtable, after these introductions. A quick introduction from you, please.
Thanks, Tarek, and really a pleasure to be here with such an amazing panel, fellows. So I am leading from Accenture all the innovation, and innovation is everything that my colleagues Peter and I mentioned before, right? And why is that so relevant these days? Because leaders, business leaders, have amazing numbers of challenges ahead. And while in the past, we had the companies were focusing on looking at the past to get insights. Now the leading organizations use data, use analytics, use artificial intelligence to make decisions that design the strategies that will help them be more future focused. And why it's so relevant is because the reality is there's many rapid shifts in the way the operating environments happen, COVID, but many others, digitization. And this changes profoundly people's behaviors, right? So we need complete new type of correlations, if you want, on the way we approach. So that's why companies that are forward-looking will succeed vis-a-vis the ones that still look on the past to decide what's next, right? And there's many cases out there, but we've done a global survey and see that 82% of the global leaders during the pandemic times, they said that the ones that were forward-looking, they've been able to come across and recover the lost ground faster than the ones that were really not prepared for that with the right infrastructure, technology, people, capabilities, and so on. So a lot to discuss. Looking forward to the great panel and to the interactions.
Thank you very much indeed. One of the phrases, Javier, that I use is that the future has already happened, is just unevenly distributed. That's actually resonates a lot as we go into our next guest, and that's Mona Ataya. Mona is a dear friend. She is a rock star in terms of what she has achieved. She has come out of an amazing exit recently with her company. Mona, what more can I say? Please introduce yourself and tell us how, what does it feel like and how is this going to impact the landscape as we go forward?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, always, Tarek. So my name is Mona Ataya. I'm the founder and CEO of Mom's World. Mom's World is a pure play vertical e-commerce. We were the pioneers in the vertical space back in 2011 when e-commerce was still very nascent. And the ecosystem didn't know if it was going to be a fad that would die or if it was going to be here to stay. 10 years on, we remain not only the pioneers, but the leader in the space. Very excited to be competing in the space. The mother, baby, and child segment is about $10 billion in the MENA region. It's growing at 39% every single year. And the fundamentals in the region, not only for e-commerce, but also for the mother and child segment, are very strong. So we are very excited with what's to come. A week ago, we announced a very important milestone for Mom's World, a very important transaction. That was a majority acquisition by a large institutional play in Saudi Arabia, the Tamer Group. Tamer is an 8 billion riyal company. They're the largest distributor of healthcare and consumer goods out of Saudi Arabia. They are a legacy business, and we are a digital business. What we're seeing more and more of, and what we anticipate will happen over the next coming years, is institutional legacy businesses with very strong brick and mortar footprints will lean in to digital pure plays like us, who have the digital DNA and the digital know-how to come together to create a symbiotic relationship where we help them digitize faster, and they help us continue our hyper growth and our super growth across MENA and beyond.
Thank you very much indeed, Mona. Yes, it is a great milestone, and you are a role model. You have broken the glass ceiling. You've actually shattered the glass ceiling, and it's amazing to see that. And we have another young lady who's shattered the glass ceiling, and she did it at 21. And she's amongst the young leaders that we have today, and that's Thea Mervold. Thea, could you please tell us your early escapades into education and learning, which I was very closely looking into, and obviously now as CEO of GetBe. A quick introduction and a context from you, please.
Thank you so much, and lovely to see you all today, and congratulations again, Mona. Super proud to hear this as well. So yes, my story, I'm also a serial entrepreneur. I built one of the first online learning apps when apps were still new, so before Angry Birds and all the other apps on the App Store for high school students. So it was one of the first online learning apps in the edtech space that later grew out to become one of the first global marketplaces for learning. So we truly connected teachers and students all over the world. In fact, our first class was between a professor in Venezuela teaching a student in Saudi Arabia. And we saw global connections truly all over the world, leveraging that global sharing economy movement. But instead of transacting physical goods, it was services and knowledge exchange. So it was sort of leveraging that wave and that movement that was happening in 2014, 2015, that was really growing, as we saw in other segments as well, like with Uber, Airbnb, and so on. So there was a trend that we capitalized on, which was the sharing economy, but for knowledge exchange. What was very interesting for us to see as our global marketplace was growing was that the software we had built behind the service became very interesting, as Mona mentioned, for the physical world and the virtual world, for other industries, enterprise, and physical players to be a part of this online movement. Many companies came to us and said, how can we use your technology, but for us, with our brand and our business model? So we decided to pivot and launch our software as a pure play service for anyone really charging for their time or selling products through their time. So we launched GetBe, which stands for Bringing Expertise Everywhere. And we're very proudly working with clients and partners from Latin America, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So it's very exciting to see how people are leveraging this digital trend in terms of, taking what works physically and understanding how to transform that virtually. We also proudly work with Accenture in Latin America in partnership with Expo 2020. Microsoft, of course, a long-term partner of ours as well. So it's very exciting to see how we can truly take, again, that human connection, what works physically, into a virtual world and help businesses and enterprise scale that experience. For us, COVID was very exciting because we saw a massive growth opportunity beyond education. So we saw a lot of growth in healthcare, wellness, coaching, mentorship, but the biggest play for us was actually retail. So retail has a massive digital transformation opportunity, and that's where we're seeing the majority of the growth as well. So we've really started doubling down in the retail space. But to your point, I think with COVID, that digital current of transformation was there even pre-COVID, but it sort of became this tidal wave that happened during COVID that truly accelerated this digital trend. And I think post-COVID now, it's not only an option, it is a must for survival, not only to survive, but to thrive for businesses and enterprises as well.
Thank you, Thea. What a lovely story. And words like pivot, words like reinventing yourself, and then also creating a platform and using one type of technology and going into another type. So as a challenger organization, she's obviously now testing the business model. And our final guest is Fahmi Shawa. Fahmi Shawa is the CEO of Immensa Labs, and fascinating company. And a great story and it's about 3D printing. You can 3D print everything, literally everything. And what's important, we've heard the big enterprise conversations. Now, Thea, Mona, and Fahmi are the ones who are challenging this enterprise and building on the edges rather than from the core. Fahmi, please introduce yourself and tell us how you are going to blow this whole thing up.
So I founded Immensa Technology Labs back in 2016, and we had one basic mission. I remember reading back then that exponential organizations are the ones that dematerialize what was once physical in nature into digital form. And our mission has been to literally digitize spare parts. Manufacturing is still very physical in nature. Our core as a Mensa offering is to create virtual warehousing for spare parts. And then you produce the spare parts using advanced manufacturing, such as 3D printing and so on. And we believe the supply chain is extremely dated. There's a lot of inefficiencies. And COVID was sort of a blessing in disguise for us, as the adoption rate has quadrupled.
That's great. Now, I mean, you said you're disrupting the supply chain. How are you doing that? I mean, are we just going to, I mean, I can take a rendering of this particular widget and you can send the rendering to anywhere in the world and it's produced locally. And because that's a question I wanted Peter Middlebrook to also come into, Peter. If you can dive in, I mean, we looked at, globalization. Now, post-COVID, we are deglobalizing and localizing and breaking down the supply chains. And here's an example of that. So perhaps a quick comment from you, Fahmi, and then Peter, if you can give us your thoughts in terms of how we are deglobalizing, if indeed we are.
In theory, yes, it's as simple as you give me a part, we actually convert it. There's a lot behind it that goes in terms of how do you actually digitize the part, the integrity of it, the criticality, how do you transform it, cybersecurity. But the tools are there. It's just a matter of who's building these digital inventories. Today, we do have clients that are stocking, and it's active. I mean, Dubai Metro is one of the first companies that did it in the region. We have a virtual warehouse for their spare parts, and they actually just send the file, not the part, to the location and 3D print it on demand close to the proximity. So it is simpler than what people, and I think the biggest obstacle is always is the mindset, not the technology. The technology, the tools are there today.
Yeah, thanks for that. Quick comment on that one, Peter, and then Zavi, also from your experience on this issue. You're on mute, Peter. You're on mute.
Yeah, that's good. So, I mean, I think, globalization appears to be a paradox in part, doesn't it? It's kind of unstoppable, but perhaps unsustainable. We explored this. I was one of the key experts on the Commission on the Future of Globalization. And we tried to look at this teleology between the rise of religious states, nation states, and this transition towards transnational corporations, if you like. And that's an interesting one because that's also a transition from democracies to technocracies. And there's lots of discussion around that going on around the fourth industrial revolution. I think the biggest concern we have, we know where it's going, right? So we know that what will happen is the virtual world will be a mirror of the physical world. And it'll be on the blockchain, and it won't be countries with a carbon footprint. It will be an individual with a carbon footprint. And every transaction you make will be known. Your phone, as you know, is the most powerful form of government that's ever existed. So there's huge opportunities that come with this. The risks I see, and I think which is where the global discussion is, we also live in a hybrid reality, and there are many layers to observe. There are winners and losers in this process of going from apps to dApps, or IPOs to ICOs, and this entire transition. So, when we talk about this, it's easy to talk about, I'm a global economist and we work on global affairs. There have been more losers as a result of what's just happened so far than winners by a country mile. So, when we talk about who is benefiting, we have to make sure that it's inclusive. And the whole point of the UN Agenda 2030 agenda is leaving no one behind. So who are we talking about as benefiting here? Global governments, global governance, corporations, tech companies, financial markets, the unemployed, the elderly, refugees. I mean, we have to split that out because I think it's a very, very uneven outcome at the moment. There are certain countries that will benefit hugely from this digitization transition, this digital by default transition. But without doubt, I think the risk is that we create another level of inequality of those who are disenfranchised because they're not engaged. And who is that? That's the most elderly, those who can't reskill when they get to 60, 65, 70. There's those who are born who will be born into the subsequent what comes out of this without transacting it itself. And then there's those who are below the poverty line, which is a very, very large number of people who don't have access to digital IDs and technology still, and this may miss them by. So I think it will be inequitous. We know the direction that it's going, and I think this is why you say the future kind of comes in installments for different people.
Javi, can you comment on this, please? And then now let's open it up to everybody, because if anybody has a comment or thought, because this is a key feature as far as this conversation is concerned. Javi, please.
Yes, indeed. Look, in the last, I would say 12 to 18 months, we've seen really a massive shift from the globalization we were used to a much more, what we call it, push to the edge. So leading companies and organizations are responding to change by pushing the decision-making authority closer to the edge. And these, they rely more on the highly networked teams to make sure that they can act with more agility. Let me put an example. So I think we're all maybe in the digital platforms such as Netflix, right? So take La Casa de Papel, Money Heist. Money Heist was produced in Spain and was the highest watched show for Netflix globally, produced very far from headquarters, not even thought from there, right? So, and we're seeing across in many other platforms. And why is this relevant? And let me put a parallelism. When you talk on computing, we're seeing more the edge, 5G. We're all hearing about 5G and the importance of edge computing. Edge computing reduces latency. And by the time the data, if you need to travel the data from the edge to the center, make the decision and bring it back to act, maybe you've already missed the point. So we're getting more to actuate, to take action at the edge, and this saves bandwidth of people, of organizations, but as well save capability, and that's why here the cloud is so relevant. Then what we're seeing is that organizations that mirror that in the way they operate, we're seeing them faster growing in the future. And for instance, Coca-Cola, which is an omnipresent company, reorganized last year to make sure that they were closer to their customers and the localization of the singularities of their customers, right? To develop new products faster and more agile into this. So this is the big trend we're seeing accelerating, and we believe that post-COVID, it will not only go as it is, but it will further accelerate. Now, the question is, can it be too far on the edge and we're going to get from the global players a sum of mushrooms instead? This is still to be seen, right? But the trend is clearly from a globalized, centralized approach to much more on the edge, localized approach into decision making.
Thank you, Javi. Can I, Mona and Thea, if I could bring you guys back in to this conversation, and in terms of you built your companies on the edge of the big enterprise that was out there, and Mona went through an exit. What's happening in across the world is innovation is being stifled to some extent. The moment you're big enough to sell, you sell. And people just want to start up apps and develop something and look for Amazon, Google, or somebody like that to buy them out. And I'm putting this both to you, Mona and Thea, is that the moment you become interesting enough, you just sell, and what happens to the amazing innovation that you've just created?
Sure. So I'm happy to jump in. So from our perspective, the desire or the objective to set is not an end all. As an entrepreneur and as an innovator, you start a business to solve unmet consumer needs. That's why you go down a certain path. You identify what you deem to be a valuable solution to solve. It is customer centric first and foremost. For us, it was the unmet needs around the mother consumer region, and we set out to solve these problems. In doing so with excellence, with speed, and building fundamental intrinsic value in Mom's world, we were able to create a business that then became attractive. So acquisition for us was a strategic decision. It came from a position of strength. We were in hyper-growth mode. In the last 5 years, we've grown 10x. And this transaction for us meant that we could continue the hyper-growth. We could grow not only our disruptive innovation towards consumers and continuing to build unfair advantages, continuing to solve unmet needs, and continuing to be a best-in-class consumer-centered organization. We are building at One's World an indispensable extension of a mother's life, and that comes from building value. The acquirer also has vested interest in this transaction. They want to digitize. They want to acquire a DNA that's robust, that's agile, that's flexible, and that understands digital and lives and breathes digital. They understand also as a legacy 100-year-old business to reinvent the way they've been operating for the last 100 years is not going to happen easily, and it's not going to happen overnight. You have to really, you have to eat the magic pie, and that is One's World. I have to stress that one of the greatest inhibitors to growth and disruption and digital enabling is the resistance to moving away from legacy systems. And you would be surprised how many large organizations still today are resistant to changing ways they've operated in the past. They think we've done this for the past 100 years, it's gotten us to where we are today, why should we change? The reality is, it's the David and Goliath story. So, you have the David, like One's World, who come in from behind, who are agile, who are fast, who are operating in the DNA of let's reinvent every single hour of every single day, as opposed to let's reapply what we learned yesterday. I think the long and short answer, Tariq, to you is, again, we don't exit for the sake of exit. We are building and creating value. One's World is going to continue building value. It's going to do that now faster and bigger and through a greater geographic footprint. And we have today the capital resources and the infrastructure from a traditional business that will allow us to continue to do that.
I at no stage said it that I was suggesting that it was exit for the sake of exit. It was more an issue that large corporations are buying out smart, young, growing companies like yourselves. And from a cultural point of view, and Naeem and Thea also please comment on this, you can't buy culture. And large organizations come in and plug a new company on the edge. And if they bring them in too much into the existing culture, they will kill it. The immune system and the antibodies will attack it and kill it. So therefore, companies like yourselves or GetB or Mensa Lab, even if they go into an exit, they need to remain and retain their DNA. A quick comment, Thea, and then Naeem, what do you think about building edges? And when Microsoft does an acquisition, how does it maintain the size that you have on the one hand as the enterprise, but the independence and the innovation of the young, agile companies? Thea, a quick comment and then Naeem.
I think a great example there as well, just going back to culture, is the LinkedIn Microsoft acquisition, but I'm sure Microsoft can comment on that. But I just wanted to add to Mona's point. Of course, there is strategic acquisition opportunities, and if that's the right thing to do for your business that you're building, then that's the right thing to do. But there's also innovators that build innovation as category leaders, right? If we think about Tesla and Elon Musk, it's not like he set out with the goal to be strategically acquired. So there are different innovation in terms of categories in becoming leaders or essentially creating new categories by themselves. So I don't necessarily think startups or entrepreneurs are building with that only goal in mind. I think we build to build and to create. And if the strategic acquisition comes up that makes sense for both parties, then of course, that's the right thing to do. There's also other options like to IPO and other ways to exit or to remain independent. But I think we create to create, we create to innovate, we create to create new categories. So I don't necessarily think that that's a challenge, because I think the question was a little bit biased from that perspective. But definitely exciting to see these strategic acquisitions happening, like what would happen with Mom's World. I think it's super exciting to see this region also becoming more attractive and seeing that as an opportunity, because this region is also a very traditional legacy region. So having strategic acquisitions that accelerate, that make sense, is very exciting for the whole ecosystem of startups in this region.
Yeah, so doesn't it make, and being controversial intentionally, doesn't it make large enterprise and the large corporations a little bit lazy in the sense that they can go and acquire a strategic partner anywhere? So the banks want to buy fintechs rather than innovate from within, and the other companies. Naeem, how would you go out there and acquire a great company which is building an app on cloud or some kind of structure? And how do you bring that into a large enterprise?
Yeah, so let me take a step back and just say that digital transformation at scale, it's first about culture and not about technology. I think technology comes at a later stage. And what I mean by this is people and organizations that have been successful in transforming or in building something that leveraged digital at scale in a successful way, they had the right culture, they had the right mindset, and then they leverage technology to deliver on that culture and that mindset, and not the other way around. And even, I mean, if you take even Microsoft as an example, I think there is a reason why I would say the old school companies, Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, HP, and I can go through a few names, and you can see from those names, there's only one company that is able to make it to the kind of new, I would say, breed of companies, including the Amazon of the world and the Google of the world and the Facebook of the world. And honestly, it's about culture. I mean, Satya, when he came, he didn't start by saying, I want to innovate on technology. He said, I'm going to change the culture of Microsoft. And that's what he said. I mean, if you read his book called Hit Refresh, it's all about how he changed the culture in Microsoft. Okay. And the previous culture that we go and acquire companies. Nokia was one of them. And then we tried to integrate them. And honestly, it wasn't the best experience. The new culture we acquire LinkedIn, and then we leave them at a separate organization. We really don't touch their DNA. We leave them operating the way they want. So we keep all the pluses. We just give them more resources to grow at a faster pace. And I think that's
but they're not making money, Naeem. LinkedIn is not making money. The $25 billion transaction hasn't merged together and brought it in to give ROI.
It depends how do you look at it, Tariq. It depends how do you look at it. First, LinkedIn, on its own, I think is doing pretty well. Of course, its value to Microsoft and to the shareholder value, it's, I think, a multiplier. So I think it depends how do you look into it, because also we went and bought GitHub with the same thing. We kept them on their own. I think what Xavi said, we're pushing things to the edge. And this is absolutely, I mean, those edge organizations, if you try to integrate them, you're going to kill them. The other thing that I think is going to happen in the future is that, yes, big organizations are going to go after smaller startups to acquire certain skill sets, certain unique technologies. My worry is that organization size that are a medium size, that they're going to struggle, because the big is going to get bigger. I think there will be lots of startups that either they'll become a Google or a Microsoft, but the majority of them are going to be acquired by those big guys. I think there is the company size that are in the middle that I think I'm a little concerned about their future and how they're going to move forward. But I think from a Microsoft perspective, and as someone who has been there for 13 years, I lived the old world and the new world of how do you acquire and how do you integrate, and I see a tremendous change. I think there is a huge value in really acquiring organization, leaving the independence around them now, and getting the best out of them. There's sometimes you'll buy small startups and you need a certain skill set, and then you'll integrate them for sure.
We can talk about some new business models, and Javi, you want to come in on that one. I actually believe that the 1 to 500 people companies with all of the technological capabilities that we have in our hands now will actually be very successful. So perhaps you want to comment, Javi?
Yes. Look, building a bit on Naeem's point, and I'm fully on his line on this. So let me put an example, which is Accenture itself. So 8 years ago, Accenture was 90x% a technology company. We're doing technology, SAPs, and so on. Today, 90% of our revenues come from digital, 90. So, and it's a $45 billion company. So to pivot a multinational company of this size with today 600,000 people from being tech to being digital, it requires a massive effort across an acquisition of not only culture, because I don't think you can acquire culture. What you can acquire is skills that on the edge, properly nurtured, can help transform and pivot the core, but properly ring-fenced, and then the transfer model agreed, right? So I think it's the M&A approach. It's in itself a secret sauce, right? On how you go, how you spot, how you onboard, how do you develop and scale the skills once you've acquired, right? So, but I'm a firm believer, and look, only in this last year, we've acquired already 40 companies and invested $4 billion into this on cloud-related stuff, on analytics stuff, on blockchain stuff, because these are the alpha trends that you mentioned, Tariq, that will shape completely for an organization in the future. We don't have them at scale inside, but the market requires those. So we need to aggregate. And as the bet of risk of the innovators is much faster, they go faster, we need to acquire that to be able to learn faster from them and grow at speed on those, right? So that's why I think that when big meets the small, I think it's where the magic happens, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Now we have 3 or 4 big questions to ask. We'll be talking about the future of money, the future of work, the future of learning, and all of these elements are going to come together. So let's move through this rapidly. The future of money. Peter, may I bring you in to this one?
Sure.
The whole world is going digital in terms of currencies. Crypto is going to blow things up. What is your quick macro view, and how is it going to impact our daily lives?
So, I mean, we're in a digital age, so we're going to have digital currencies. Everybody knows that. The question is, who mints them? Are they sovereigns? Are they corporations, and so forth? And that's where a global political economy issue. There are lots of deep issues with crypto. I'm an absolute strong supporter, and it's not, for me, it's not about money. What crypto offers is a fundamental shift in the way services are delivered and transacted. And this goes back to this model again of having hyper-global and hyper-local and stripping out the institutions in the middle. Global rules established and people can transact locally. But there are lots of deep problems with crypto as well. Any crypto that is issued becomes instantaneously, in my view, a global currency. It doesn't just be bought in one sovereign territory. It's not a US dollar or a euro.
Sorry, Peter, I think you're frozen. We can't hear you. So Peter is frozen, but we'll talk to the rest of the audience, the panelists, as far as crypto is concerned. Do you think, Mona, Thea, Fahmi, is it going to fundamentally affect your business and your life? Are you ready to be paid in crypto today? Are you? How are you starting to think through that whole process of Bitcoin and crypto becoming an integral part of your day-to-day business? Fahmi, you haven't spoken for a while.
Sorry. Definitely, I think right now we haven't adopted Bitcoin. We have looked at blockchain actually, and yesterday we had a very long session with one of the leading companies because of blockchain, and NFT is going to become an integral part of our business. We're transferring assets between organizations. Before yesterday, the World Economic Forum nominated and selected us as one of the innovating companies of the world in manufacturing. And the discussion we're having with them is, thank you. We thank them for being part of the WEF. And why us? And it was interesting to talk about this entire digitization. They mentioned in terms of the cryptocurrencies, the blockchain, and how they see everything interlinked. It stops being about just what digital currency it is. It's a fact of life. I'm giving you an asset. It's in digital. How do you secure it? So definitely, I think it's an integral part for every business. I'm no expert in cryptocurrencies, but it's definitely something we do have to adopt.
We'll have the tension between centralization and decentralization a lot. I mean, by definition, a central bank has to centralize things. And in terms of reality, everything will get decentralized. And I think that is going to be Peter's back. Peter, we'll be going to the central bank centralizing and decentralizing. Oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, so this is. I'm sorry for banging out there. I mean, again, I think that there are some significant challenges. And this is why, I mean, it's like any, change in the future is often resisted. We could have had the energy transition from, an internal combustion engine to electric vehicles probably 50, 60 years ago. But oil was part of the petrodollar and part of foreign policy. So
I think we're struggling with his links again. Right. I think let's move on to the next big topic that I wanted to bring in, and that is the future of work. I know that Thea wants to talk about how to humanize that. I know that Naeem wants to talk about how the future of work is going to impact all of us. Mona, you have built culture, and now you're developing into the future. And Javi came in with a philosophy and a concept of real virtuality, of space and time and hybrid structure and how to put the whole thing together. So Javi, perhaps you could have a quick comment, and then Thea, how to humanize it. What is real virtuality?
Yes. So what the beauty is that the COVID has opened our eyes to bring many of the everyday, I would say, interactions and experience that were physical to be online, working, learning, socializing, even, right? Socializing, having a drink online, right? So you're starting to find these type of things that the pandemic has overall encourage organizations to experiment around that, right? And experience that were physical or by default physical. Now there is a mix. And we're seeing a rise and a lot of opportunities of blended physical and virtual worlds coming together, right? So for customers, for employees, and so on. And I think organization needs to rethink their competitive advantages and blend physical and virtual offerings. They need to activate new roles, new opportunities, the companies that, and now there's the big discussion around, should we go back into the office or should we have a mix of this, because there's advantages of both, even at big tech companies. Apple is thinking one way, others is thinking the other way. So there's not a common denominator, but the reality is that, and that's why I like a lot what Microsoft with Mesh did, right? The mixed reality platform. I think it's very good the way they interacted, or in healthcare, that you see surgeons basically from different countries being able to gather in holograms and doing surgeries live together. These are things that have been done through massive innovation on these days, bringing physical and virtual together and exploding the future, right? So a lot of opportunities ahead.
Thank you. Mona, how do you see the future of work? Because you have millions and millions of mothers who are online, who are your customers. How do you see that future of work in your ecosystem?
So we do believe in a hybrid model. The bottom line question is, do you need to be sitting physically across from your peer, your supplier, your customer in order to deliver with excellence? And the reality is, today we have Zoom, we have Teams, we have many means and resources that allow us to tap into people without physically being next to them. And in the world of agility and speed, I can get on, 10 calls in 1 hour just by clicking from one Zoom meeting to another. I can't really do that physically, especially if I'm traveling from one place to another. So there's tremendous value in working remotely. There's also tremendous value in the hybrid approach, where you do have these opportunities where people actually do need to be physically present next to each other. And there's a time for each. We incidentally at Mums World, we've had a hybrid model for the past 2 years. So we always say we don't care where you're sitting. If you're sitting at Starbucks or Timbuktu, as long as the job is done and it's not impacting your peers or your suppliers negatively, who cares? It only becomes a question mark when the results aren't met. So again, definitely we're going to. This is where also innovation is going to, I think, come to play in the next few months. We're going to see a lot more services, enablers, data touchpoints that allow for this hybrid model to be much more impactful, much more fluid, and take it to the next level. We talked earlier about some of the limitations of teams. I suspect if we talk together in 6 months from now, these limitations will no longer exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Naeem, a quick comment, because I know future of work is very close to your heart. And then I'd like to go to Peter to comment on how the future of work is being seen across the emerging developing world that you are traveling to a lot of the times and advising governments. But first, Naeem, what are your thoughts in terms
Yeah,
of
look, I think there's a huge debate, and I don't know if people who followed LinkedIn nowadays, they can see there is a huge debate about what the future of work is going to look like, and why what has been happening over the past 18 months, where people have been working completely remotely, and it has been working pretty well for lots of people, why those same organizations are saying we want people to go back. And I think there's a big debate about it, and I don't think there is right or wrong. I personally believe the days of the 5 days office, 8 to 5, are over. And I think I completely agree with Mona. Hybrid, most probably where everyone will end up. But I think I'm going to use the word flexibility. I think flexibility is going to be key to the success of organization in the future work. You need to provide a flexible way of working to people for you to be able, one, to attract talent, and second, to retain talent. And exactly what you said, if we want to retain talent who are either mothers that have specific commitments, or even fathers who have specific commitments, you need to provide that flexibility. So I think it's going to be interesting how the future is going to look like. I strongly believe that hybrid is where everyone will end up at the end of the day. That hybrid definition is going to be dependent on lots of other factors, depending on the organization. But I think technologies like Teams and Zoom and others are going to play even bigger roles in our future life of work for sure.
Yeah. Good comment, Peter.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hope it doesn't cut off again. I think it depends on what industry you're in. I think if you're in the service sector and you can transact your business remotely, then eminently it makes good sense to do it. I think, as Mona was saying, if you go back to the old school, the reason people worked in one place is because we didn't have the ability to have performance metrics around somebody who wasn't next to you. You had management structures and so forth. And I think as we improve our ability to be able to, first of all, to trust people, but to create metrics around the performance that is outcome or impact driven rather than the number of hours they do, that makes all good sense. But if you're a farmer or you're producing, or you're an airline pilot, or you're a lawyer that sees people, there's still a whole bunch of industries which by definition are not necessarily as amenable to becoming completely virtual. So I think it's going to be hybrid across different sectors. I think it will be a huge cost efficiency eventually. I think the cost of running businesses will substantially reduce if you don't have these heavy kind of overhead costs in the same way. But I also think a lot of this depends on how long this COVID reality continues to exist. There is a very real risk that, in 1 or 2 years, if everyone's vaccinated, there's a tendency to go back to the old normal for cultural reasons as much as anything else. But no doubt in certain sectors, and the blockchain, I think, will deepen this, because we don't need lawyers in the same way. You can sell real estate on the blockchain in a different way as well. So it's going to be a very interesting future. And it will change the nature of employment for sure.
If I may, Peter, on your things about farmers, one of the things that digitization and automation creates is a massive reimagining of their work, right?
Absolutely.
You have
sure, potentially
drones checking the crops, you have robots doing the crop, and then with the command and control center, they can have it at home or somewhere else in the Maldives having holidays. I mean, even minery that is purely was heavy people centric. Now we work with companies and fully automated mines, right? A lot of the jobs are being reimagined, and I think then the remote working will accelerate on that front, and reskilling required, by the way.
Yeah.
Tariq, I just want to, just very quick, I think it depends on where you are. If you go to northeast Nigeria or to Chad or Somalia or to southern Ethiopia, where there's small land holdings of a quarter of a hectare with a small family, they are not digitizing anytime soon. The large industrial farms and so forth. So this is where I think there's many different layers to this reality, whether you're a city state, whether you're a fragile state, whether you're part of the informal economy, whether you're a small business, whatever. But I would agree in principle, yes. But I still think there's many people that in 100 years' time will probably be doing things the old way.
We're getting a few comments from, I think we've touched a nerve here as far as hybrid work is concerned. One of the comments we received was working remotely may make sense for very few and very specific sectors, but mostly it is a myth. Collaboration, connectivity, and engagement can only take place by being together at the office. This is Abdurrahman Obeid. And another comment came through that believing in the future of work will be hybrid. However, to build up the culture and empathy happens more in the real world, which is very much needed when people are working with each other in unprecedented situations. So I started with trust, empathy, values, truth. Perhaps this thing is there too, is how do we build empathy in this virtual environment, and what are the new intelligences that we need to develop to be able to cope in this new environment? Perhaps, Thea, you'd like to comment on that.
Yes, I wanted to echo your point as well about trust. I think it all links back to trust. Technology, however we use it, is just a tool to facilitate, but it all goes back to the fundamentals of us, right? It's trust, it's how we communicate. It's about making sure that you have those foundations in place. Technology is a means to facilitate that. And I think that's what we've seen also through the work that we do at GetB, is we're empowering organizations to offer this hybrid working model. But the foundation and the core of it all is trust and human connection. Because what is technology? It is a tool, right? And I think we have to understand that, and it's about understanding the underlying strategy and how and why we use things. That's what makes it different. But also echoing Mona's point earlier, this hybrid workforce is also possible because it's about outcomes. No matter where it is that you're sitting, you know, you're able to measure these outcomes now also virtually and collaborate virtually. So it is really understanding what is your strategy as a business, how do you operate as a culture, because I think having very strong values and culture is becoming ever more important in this digital world. But really adding that human touch and that personal touch back to business, regardless of how you operate, I think is becoming increasingly important to deliver that trust and that empathy online.
Thank you. Naeem, you and Javi both have mentioned the word skilling several times. I'd like to challenge that, if I may, please. For me, it's about learning and learning how to learn. Perhaps that's the number one skill. And building the future of education around the ability to learn, because knowledge is going to be available on the cloud. Our brains are going to be connected to the cloud through a neural network. Information is ubiquitous around us. So just knowledge is not enough. Skills will go to automation. So effectively, what we're going back to are those natural human skills of empathy, love, intuition, heart, soul, spirit, common sense, critical thinking. Those are the elements that we're talking about, not skilling. Surely, Naeem, sorry, I'm challenging you on this.
Yeah.
What do you mean by skilling? And same with you, Javi. And then Thea, you can talk about your education experience on this one.
So let me first agree with you that the natural human, I would say, skills around empathy and other, I would say, human natures are the key. There's no question about it. But in a world that is very digital, where technology is playing a bigger role, where basically whether you are a user of technology or you're an inventor of technology, you need a certain skill set depending on what you're doing to be able to deliver on your job or on your role, etc. There is definitely a necessity to upscale your, I would say, technical skills in order to deliver on what you're supposed to do. Because today, if you are if you work in Accenture, or if you work at the digital department in a bank or in a retailer, the technical skill that you need today around cloud and AI, they're completely different than the skills you had 10 years back. And if you don't get those skills to the level that you're today, you will just not be able to help your organization leverage those new technologies around AI, blockchain, cloud to take them to the next level. So there is definitely a huge requirement for skilling on that front. But also, even if you're a user, you need to, I mean, we can call it learning, but in all honesty, learning how to use Teams, because you're living in Teams the whole day, partially or not partially, is part of your skilling as well, because that will be a de facto requirement today for any job that you're required to do in the future. So I think the requirement for technical skilling is going to be there. I think has been multiplied, and we're seeing clearly organizations that have focused on skilling their employees, we're seeing the outcome, and we're seeing it very, very clear. And organizations that didn't, also we're seeing the missed on the opportunity. I don't know, Xavier, or your point of view as well.
Yeah, look, let me just put one data point that I think it's quite visual on what we have ahead, right? So we're estimating that in the next decade, we're going to see 800 million jobs globally displaced, and 375 will need complete reskilling or switching jobs from doing A to B. So this is a massive task, right? And that's when we call it skilling is because the type of jobs to be, not the ones that ours is today, the to be ones will require a complete different set of skills that maybe people can, through learning, bridge them. We see two immediate implications. One, governments will need to put very strong, deep programs to catch up. This is not something that only companies and so will be able to go through. So we'll need a lot of government help. And in this region, we're starting to see a lot, the North Star setting from governments on this. And then the second is that the organizations, and here is as well, the private sector, will need to unlock the value that sits between when you bring the human and the machine together, the augmentation of the job, right? So a back office credit officer that was analyzing a credit risk for a bank, now will have an AI tool that will propose what are the best options and the risk models and so on. Before, everything was done almost manually. So all this makes the decision faster, wiser, but of course requires different type of skills from both parts, right? So from the AI and the training of the AI, but as well for the agent that sits along with him. So 800 million jobs displaced. So reskilling will be required across.
Tariq, can I?
Yes, fine.
Tariq, do you mind? I just want to throw something here, and I want to be devil's advocate. I mean, this is the history of the world. I mean, we reskill every 20, 30 years. When tractors were farmers had to reskill. When calculators came, accountants had to reskill. So the only difference is the pace of adoption. But I mean, this is always been there, and we deal with this.
Maybe
It's
it's
a
in the
new phenomenon.
semantics of the word skill. To me, skill is a more of a repetitive task, a learning activity, etc., as opposed to the ability to learn and having capabilities. That to me is a slightly different, for want of another word, skill, as opposed to. So I'm just sort of challenging the word skill rather. Perhaps it's semantics, but we understand that. With your permission, I will share a couple of slides that I use there amongst my favorite slides, my all-time favorite slides, and that will really give an interesting context to what we are discussing right now. Here is a little statistic from a survey that was done by Oracle that 64% of the people trust a robot more than they trust their manager. Now that I find a staggering number. And in some cases, people, in terms of repetitive tasks, trust the machines much more. So this is one issue. The other one is about creativity and age. And I think what tends to happen is as we grow older, here's a little girl at 3-4 years of age. Her creativity, this is a NASA study done, a very famous one, 95% creativity. Then we send them to school, it goes down to 50%. Then we send them to college, it goes down to 25%. And by the time us here sitting around this panel, we are at a handsome 10%. In terms of the creativity we were born with and how we destroyed it over time through habit, through repetition, through fear of failure, etc., etc. So what we're looking at is some new kinds of relevant future degrees. And this is where I'm going in terms of learning new things, to be an anthropologist, a musician, or a gerontologist, or bioethicist and stuff. These are the kind of degrees that we need to be looking at as we go into the future, rather than just reskilling for something. So this is what I mean by a increasing our creativity and finding a new way to approach our future of learning. Anybody, Mona, Thea, Peter, anybody who haven't commented?
And the education system will need to dramatically evolve for that, right?
Absolutely.
Correct.
Yeah.
So how soon can you get a new degree approved by the Ministry of Education before it gets obsolete, right? So
Yes.
just to put an example, right? So I think the whole process of education from the academia will need to change.
Just a quick one, Derek. I mean, I've been involved. I've led the restructuring, I think, of 4 national education systems, and the problem is that I wouldn't say it's the tyranny of the establishment, but government and establishment doesn't move very quickly because it employs a lot of people. There's a lot of teachers out there, and they have civil servants contracts, and they have pensions, which so any change at that level is quite complicated. You can look at what happened in Azerbaijan. They had a big deal with British Petroleum. They created an oil stabilization fund. And then they created ASAN, which is remarkable 10 years ago. And ASAN was a fully digitized ID service hub where you can go into a corporate, on an E Street, you can go into and get 170 services within 70 minutes. But that meant they had to redo all the back office and front office reprogram within the administration, which they did. But they couldn't sack people, which would be the logical outcome as we don't need you anymore. But then you have another problem. So, the question here is that, I would say your brain is your hardware and what you think is your software, right? So if you go to school and you're being taught to be an employee, or are you being taught to be self-employed, a business owner, or an investor? Because each one of those is different softwares. One is more agile, one is, so this is the question. How do we see the economy coming? How are we going to restructure education that allows individuals then to be more agile and to either drive new ideas, to profit from them, or to collaborate in different ways? And I think part of the problem there is that the change is not going to change. Always comes from the margin. It's not going to come from the education system itself. It's going to come outside the education system, is what you see, and start to bleed in to transform it. And it'll take individuals to drive it, I believe.
Thea, you have a comment? Thea?
Yeah, I mean, now we have access. Can you hear me okay? Yes?
Yes, I can. Yes, we can.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, now we have access to all the information in the world, right? It's in our pockets, it's in our hands. So it's no longer about retaining and repeating information. It's about being analytical and critical to the information that exists. So it's really having that shift in terms of, okay, it's not about learning facts and figures, it's about learning how to analyze, learning how to be critical. This is becoming even more important. But the point that I want to make, and to echo Peter's point here, it's about also from a higher education perspective and also from an employee and employer perspective, is to also recognize more of these micro courses. I think that's going to be a big trend that you're going to see in the higher ed world, because by the time you finished your traditional degree, most of what you've learned is already outdated. Look at marketing, for example, right? It's not necessarily about learning all the theories of marketing, because by the time that you've graduated, now you have Google Analytics, you have data, you have all of these different growth hacking tools that you haven't been taught in your traditional degree. So having the ability for employers to recognize these micro degrees and micro reskilling is becoming increasingly important. And we're seeing initiatives like this with His Highness under 1 million Arab coders in partnership with Microsoft in really retraining, reskilling, and making this reskilling accessible to many, I think is becoming increasingly important in the world that we're living in.
Thank you. Thanks, Thea. That's a very valid point and context that you brought in. We've got about 8-9 minutes to go. So I'd like to ask 2 big questions, and then we'll go in for a little bit of a closure. And the question is around purpose and how we are purpose driven as corporations and young companies to try and create a new vision. So let me throw a controversial element in there, like suppose Elon Musk and or Jeff Bezos, who got money coming out of their ears, they just hand over $1 billion to you and say that you can't use this $1 billion on yourself. Mona, what would you invest that $1 billion in? What would you do? And how would it be purpose driven, if at all? Where would that go in your world?
The question is, if I have $1 billion, what would I do with it today?
Yeah, you have to deploy it, you have to employ it somewhere, and but not on yourself. In other words, don't go buying yachts and big homes, but to actually deploy it out there. What would you invest in and why?
So my question to you is, do you want the honest answer or the right answer?
I would want the honest answer, please. No political correctness in this town.
If I'm going to buy an island in the Maldives, I think that's out of the question. Look, as an entrepreneur, personally, I've always been driven by impact stories. I've always been driven by creating something that I feel is valuable, so that when someone mentions Muna, they mention it with value as opposed to with non-value. So when I left my corporate career to become an entrepreneur, I was driven by creating ecosystem impact. The Middle East is home for me. It's a region that is fast changing. It's a region that once upon a time had an exodus of incredible talent who are leading the region and not coming back because of the perceived lack of opportunity, lack of financial gains, etc. And so one of my, if you like, purpose was to come back to the region with the education, the information, the resources that I have gained outside and give back to the region. Both the businesses that I've been involved in, both Faith and Mumworld, have been impact driven. I'm a mother of 3 children. So Mumworld was very much empowering mothers to make the most informed decisions. I fundamentally believe you empower a mother, you empower a child, you empower a child to change the world. Faith was also an impact story. So you're not doing something in a vacuum, and it's that why that builds, that drives you and gets you up every day as an entrepreneur despite the challenges and the nays that you are battling on a daily basis.
Thanks, Mana. I mean, what you're saying here is beautifully aligned with your purpose and your work that you do. So it's wonderful to see that your passion, your purpose, your company is all aligned as far as the future is concerned. Fahmi, where will you spend your $1 billion? You're on mute.
That's easy. Very easy. I'll be going around setting up additive manufacturing factories across the third world countries in Africa, refugee camps, enabling people to produce their own parts, educate them, reduce carbon footprint, and become self-dependent.
Amazing, amazing. So that would become your purpose. Peter, what would be your purpose? How would you spend $1 billion? Chump change for you because you do that all the time.
No, I mean, I spent much of my life putting together multi-billion-dollar funds, and their purpose is always kind of social. I mean, the answer is I already have, because I have the purpose, I just don't have that money. We have a social enterprise which we started 2 years ago with a company, joint venture with a company called Nottingham Spurk in the United States, and we've redesigned refugee and IDP housing and affordable housing. We're now doing the prototyping in the UAE, and $1 billion, we'd use a blended finance facility. I'd probably leverage in another 2 or 3 billion into that, and that would provide, in all the countries which we're looking at, homes for probably anywhere from 10 to 30 million people as a model that then can be replicated.
Thank you. Amazing. You're very focused. Thea, suddenly a windfall of $1 billion. Where would you go with that?
To echo some of the other points, I think I would start an impact and innovation fund, but also making sure that there's a focus on representation and diversity in founders, because as we all know, female founders are severely underrepresented in the impact and VC space, but more profitable and more sustainable. So we'd really make sure that we had a focus on that, also look at the SDGs and make sure that social enterprise, just want to highlight, isn't charity. So social impact and social innovation is really not NGOs or nonprofits, but it's enterprises with impact. So I would start a social innovation fund with that thesis in mind.
Thank you. Javi?
I would tag along with Thea on this, because I'm seeing ESGs becoming more and more relevant in the future now. And I'm not saying it as a way to create a nice code for the company to showcase. It's about delivering on that. One of the things, I think we're very good at marketing what we aim at, but not about measuring if we're delivering it. And that's why creating a measure system to see how we create impact across all the stakeholders beyond the current shareholders, I think this is one of the big challenges, right? Because we all continue to be measured by the return on our shareholder value, right? And I think this is where we need to go 360, right? And so societies, employees, partners, and so on are key fundamental points. And so building on that and creating an organization that brings that into a scale across.
So you touched on an amazing point about stakeholder value, and the multiple stakeholders are there. So capitalism, as we know it, is probably going to be challenged as we look forward into the future. Naeem, quick comment from you, and then we'll go around and get a final takeaway, one nugget to walk away with. So Naeem.
Yeah, I mean, look, quickly, I'll probably take this $1 billion, split it into half. One being Lebanese now, I think definitely a microfinance fund to try to get the focused on startups in Lebanon to try to get the situation out of this mess definitely will be my top priority over anything else at this point of time. But also, I think the other part, I would like to leverage it again as a fund focused on startups led by diverse resources. And here, I want to echo what Thea is saying. I think there is a requirement to focus more on startups led by female. There's no question. There's a huge opportunity there. And it's not like we just want to do something good. There is a huge opportunity for startups led by females to be more successful. And I think that there's a requirement to be more focused. But also, I think there is a little bit a requirement to focus on diverse type of startup leadership here, including minorities, ethnicities, etc. I think that's what I would do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that's the sort of formal end of all of the things. We've had it's a large panel and a lot of ideas and energy there. And thank you for all of you for contributing the insights that you have. So to end this, we'd like to sort of go around the room, the panel, and ask for one takeaway, one nugget, one golden moment that we should be walking away today with. And hopefully to benefit us from this roundtable in this session. Mona, may I start with you, please? The one nugget that you would like to share with us that would inspire us and enable us to look into a better future.
So lots of takeaways. I think for me the most important anchor is the world is changing. Hybrid models of the way we operate are fundamental. Even creating culture, creating dynamic growth can be done remotely. You do not need to physically be in front of a person to create empathy, growth mindset, and the new future. So hybrid, new way of operating is key to agility.
Thank you. Fahmi, what is your takeaway for us, sir?
Embrace innovation. Be the first to try, take risks, otherwise we fall behind. Take risks and otherwise we fall behind. Amazing. Yeah, spoken from a true entrepreneur. From one true entrepreneur to another true entrepreneur. Thea, what is your takeaway?
A takeaway that I want to leave with, I think, is an interesting data point and quote, and it's more of a generational perspective. So if you ask people who are over 60 how much time they spend online, they say 1 to 2 hours. If you ask anyone sort of between 30 and 60 how much time do you spend online, for example, shopping online, they would say 4 to 5 hours. They know how to categorize it. If you ask anyone under 30 how much time do you spend online doing X activity, whatever that activity is, they don't understand the question because they are digitally native, right? So I think that's the reality that we live in. That's the generational shift that's happening. So for all of our industries, for all of our businesses, whatever it is that you do, digitally native is now becoming the norm. And that's the generation that is growing up to become our customers, to become our colleagues, to become the people that we live and work with. So I think digital is no longer an option. It is becoming the standard. And with that, customers are demanding more. Your employees and colleagues are demanding more. And as an entrepreneur, I have to say, if there's anything GetBe can do to help support that transition, please do get in touch.
Wonderful insight and a great offer. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Thea. Javi, your takeaway for us?
So I would like to put it in one word: change. I would like to leave it like this: change, because I think organizations need to be shaped for change, and we need to put our organization approach to the edge we set and learning from the future, but always with a change mindset. So that will make us more resilient.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Change mindset, growth mindset, perhaps the next thinking mindset to be added onto that whole process. Peter, your comments, sir.
I think just the old adages of, we are the people we've been waiting for, nobody else, and therefore you have to be the change you want to see.
Thank you. Thank you. Very philosophical. Appreciate that. And my co-host and our partners on this project, Naim, what would you like to have as our final thought?
Yeah, I think the magic word for me is innovation. I think we need to push not only ourselves, our organizations, our governments, and our children to focus on innovation, because I think only people with innovative thinking will be able to survive the future.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Nate. A final comment from me. I feel that we started with trust and we will end with trust. I think that is something that we need to build on as a currency and as something which is really important to us. We need to define our purpose and what truly matters. And the more I see technology, the more I feel that we need to become more human as we go into the future. So going back, not even going back, to look at our internal intelligences and the humanity and compassion that we have, and to become purpose-driven is one of the key things I'd like to have as a takeaway. And finally, I think there is so much opportunity and abundance out there. We need to have that abundance mindset. And as long as we can think in terms of that abundance, we will always find when the human brain is a goal-seeking organ, it will find opportunities if the mindset is actually there. And I think that's the sort of energy that we should be employing as we go forward into the world as abundant thinkers. All the opportunities and the technologies and capabilities and facilities are there. It's all in there. It's all in our hearts. And I think we should have compassion and empathy as we look forward. So with those words, I'd like to thank Mona Ataya, Fahmi Shawa, Peter Middlebrook from Athens, Javi Anglada from down the road, and of course, Naim. Amazing panel, very large panel, and thank you very, very much indeed. Sorry, Thea, of course, from Oslo. So thank you very much indeed to all of you. You've been very, very participative and involved. We'll have this available recording available to you soon. But thank you again. All the best. Thanks to the guests. Thanks to the comments. Cheers. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.